The day the galaxy misread Earth. The first mistake the galaxy made was assuming silence meant weakness. They found Earth the way predators find an injured animal, slowly circling, waiting for it to collapse on its own. No grand fleet announcing itself. No heroic first contact protocol. Just a quiet drift of alien observation vessels parked beyond Mars like arrogant tourists watching a primitive village burn itself out. They studied everything. Our wars. Our politics. Our media. Our arguments and comment sections. And they laughed. Not the kind of laughter born of fear. The kind that comes when something is so small you stop considering it dangerous. Carbon-based civilization, fragmented governance, nuclear deterrence instability. The Galcom report concluded. Threat level, negligible. Potential for resource extraction, high. On Earth, we never saw them. Not at first. We were too busy fighting each other over borders drawn by dead men, over ideologies that changed with every generation, over resources we pretended were endless. And yet, we always stopped short of extinction. That was something the aliens failed to understand. Not mercy. Habit. Survival instinct. Adaptation. We were very, very good at not dying. The first contact didn't come with diplomacy. It came with an ultimatum. A broadcast split open every screen on Earth simultaneously. Air traffic control, hospital monitors, cracked smartphones in war zones, even analog emergency radios that hadn't worked in years. A face appeared. Smooth. Symmetrical. Almost human, if you ignored the extra iris in each eye and the faint bioluminescent pulse under the skin. I am Administrator Velcor of the Varelian Accord, it said calmly. Your planet is now under review for annexation. Resistance will be educationally corrected. A pause. Then, almost amused. Do not attempt communication. We have already translated your entire language database. You are, predictably, emotional and inefficient. Across the world, humanity reacted exactly as humanity always has when told it is irrelevant. We argued. Some called it a hoax. Others prayed. Some launched missiles at empty sky just to feel involved. And a few, a very few, went quiet. Because deep down, those few recognized something in Velcor's tone. Not superiority. Assumption. An assumption is something humanity has killed more times than any army. 48 hours later, the Varelian Peace Fleet entered Earth orbit. 3,000 ships. Perfect geometry. Perfect discipline. Perfect arrogance. They expected surrender broadcasts. Instead, they received silence. That bothered them. Silence was not in their data models. Velcor ordered a planetary scan. That's when things started going wrong. The first anomaly was Antarctica. No life signs. No infrastructure. Just ice. Except, not empty. Buried beneath 3 kilometers of ice was something that should not have existed according to any of their scans. Massive energy signatures. Layered structures. Movement. Velcor frowned for the first time in his career. Explain that, he ordered. A subordinate stammered. It's reading as subterranean industrial infrastructure. But sir, it predates our detected technological threshold by. Impossible, Velcor snapped. Then Earth responded. Not with a voice. With a signal. A transmission so old it shouldn't have still been broadcasting. A single encrypted packet, repeated across every alien frequency. 3 words. We saw you. Deep under Antarctica, something woke up. Something humanity had never publicly admitted existed. Not a weapon. A doctrine. Project. Last chorus. Not built to win wars. Built to end them so completely no one would try again. The Varelians detected activation spikes across every continent simultaneously. Underground bunkers that were not bunkers. They were engines. Factories that did not produce goods. They produced inevitability. Velcor leaned forward. What are they doing? No one answered. Because no one knew. And for the first time in recorded Varelian history, fear entered the bridge of an Accord flagship. On Earth, in a forgotten command facility somewhere under what used to be called Nebraska, an old man in a faded uniform watched the monitors flicker. General Marcus Hale. Retired on paper. Still very much on duty in reality. Beside him, a younger officer whispered, "Sir, they're above the activation threshold. If we proceed, there's no recall window." Hale took a slow sip of coffee that had gone cold 10 hours ago. "We tried peace," he said quietly. "Yes, sir." "We sent ambassadors." "Yes, sir." "We signed treaties they never read." "Yes, sir." He looked at the screen showing alien ships hovering above a fragile blue world. Then he smiled. Not kindly. Not warmly. Like a man who had finally stopped pretending the world was reasonable. "Then let's show them the other side." He pressed a single button. In orbit, the Varelian fleet detected a sudden gravitational distortion. Then another. And another. Space began to fold. Velcor stood abruptly. "What is that?" A tactical officer screamed. "Massive energy structures activating beneath planetary crust. They're not defensive systems, they're..." The lights on the bridge flickered. Once. Twice. Then every Varelian ship received the same incoming transmission. Not translated. Not decoded. Already understood. Because it wasn't language. It was intent. A memory forced into signal form. War. Every war humanity had ever fought. Compressed. Optimized. Refined. And then weaponized. Velcor whispered, "No civilization survives that kind of history." The screen shifted. Earth's surface cracked open in precise geometric lines. Not chaos. Design. And from beneath the planet, massive structures began to rise. Not missiles. Not ships. Something worse. Things that looked like architecture had been trained to hate. The first Varelian ship vanished without impact. It simply stopped existing. Then another. Then 20. Fleet formations broke instantly, not from damage, but confusion. Their targeting systems could not lock onto what was killing them because their sensors refused to accept what they were seeing. Velcor shouted, "Return fire!" Nothing responded. Because there was nothing left to respond with. Across the fleet, panic spread like a biological contagion. And somewhere deep in the collapsing formation, an unknown human transmission echoed one final time. "We didn't build this for you." A pause. "We built it so no one ever comes back." On Earth, General Hale watched the sky burn quietly. No celebration. No cheering. Just a tired exhale. Behind him, the younger officer asked, "Sir, was this really necessary?" Hale didn't look away from the screen. "They thought we were alone," he said. "That's always the mistake. And now?" Now the first alien fleet was breaking apart above their planet like glass under pressure. And Earth was still waking up. Hale finally answered. "Now they learn why we never needed the stars to survive." And far above Earth, Velcor realized something horrifying in his final moments of command. Humanity had not been hiding from the galaxy. They had been waiting for it to arrive. When the galaxy realized Earth was the trap, the Varelian fleet didn't retreat. Not at first. That was the second mistake. Their doctrine didn't include retreat from a primitive species. Retreat implied parity. Respect. Acknowledgement that the opponent had earned the right to be feared. So instead, they escalated. Commander Velcor's last coherent order before communications collapsed was simple. Erase the planet. But what came back from Earth was simpler. A correction. The space above Earth fractured like glass under invisible pressure. The Varelian ships began firing at the planet's surface with everything they had: plasma lances, gravimetric spears, subspace collapse charges. The sky should have died. Instead, it resisted. Not passively. Organized resistance. The planetary structures rising from Earth were not buildings, not ships, not weapons in any traditional sense. They were responses. Each alien strike triggered something underneath the crust that adapted in real time, shifting form, rewriting itself mid-impact like living mathematics refusing to accept the answer given. One Varelian admiral whispered, "That's not technology." His second officer finished it for him, voice shaking. "That's doctrine." Deep underground, last chorus was no longer dormant. It was awake in full. And it was angry in a way no alien mind had ever been trained to interpret. Because it wasn't emotional anger. It was procedural anger. The kind born from repeated historical instruction. We tried peace. We tried negotiation. We tried containment. And every time, someone came back anyway. On the surface, General Hale's bunker shook as orbital impacts struck the atmosphere. Dust rained from the ceiling like slow snow. The younger officer was pale now. "Sir, they've increased output by 300%. We can't hold structural integrity at this rate." Hale nodded like a man receiving weather updates. "Then don't hold it," he said. The officer blinked. "Sir? We're not trying to survive the storm," Hale replied. "We're teaching it picked the wrong planet to fall on." A distant explosion rolled across the sky like thunder that never ended. The officer swallowed. "They're adapting too, sir. The aliens. Their ships are learning our patterns." Hale finally turned. "That's the funny thing about learning," he said quietly. "Sometimes you learn too late what the lesson was for." Above Earth, Velcor's fleet began to change tactics. At first, cautiously. Then desperately. They stopped firing at the planet. They started firing at the structures emerging from it. It helped. Briefly. Then the structures began copying alien firing patterns. Then improving them. Then returning them. Not as retaliation. As upgrades. A Varelian cruiser disintegrated when its own weapon's signature returned through its reactor core. Another vanished when its shield frequency was mirrored and inverted until it collapsed inward like a dying star. Panic spread through the fleet again. But this time it was different. This wasn't confusion. This was realization. One junior officer screamed into open comms. "They're not defending Earth. They're studying us in reverse." Velcor snapped. "Silence!" But it was too late. The truth had already entered the system. Humanity wasn't reacting. It was processing. And then the second transmission arrived from Earth. This one was not broadcast globally. It was targeted. Every surviving alien command ship received it directly. Velcor opened it. A face appeared. Human. Older. Tired eyes. General Hale. "Velcor," Hale said calmly, as if greeting a failed customer service representative. The alien commander froze. "You know my designation?" Hale gave a faint smile. "We knew all your designations before you arrived." A pause. The alien's voice tightened. "You are committing genocide." Hale didn't flinch. "No," he said. "We're preventing the sequel." Velcor's claws tightened on the console. "You will be erased. The Accord does not tolerate resistance." Hale leaned slightly forward. "You already tried that," he said. Another pause. Then, quieter. "How's that going for you?" At that moment, something impossible happened across the fleet. Every Varelian system, navigation, weapons, communications, shifted. Not hacked. Not jammed. Rewritten. Velcor stared at his console as alien fleet maps reorganized themselves into new formations. Human formations. Tactical patterns that shouldn't exist in space warfare, unless you had spent centuries fighting yourself. "What is this?" he whispered. The reply came instantly from Hale. "That," he said, "is history." On Earth, buried deeper than any alien scan had reached, Last Chorus was no longer just infrastructure. It was memory. Every war Earth had ever fought, tribal, national, global, orbital, compressed into adaptive strategy layers. Not AI. Experience. Encoded survival instinct refined across generations of extinction-level conflict. And now it was doing what it was built to do. It was anticipating new enemies using old pain. The Varelian fleet broke formation again. But this time, it wasn't panic. It was fragmentation. Ships began retreating independently, abandoning coordination entirely. Their doctrine, absolute unity under command, collapsed under the pressure of something that adapted faster than hierarchy could respond. Velcor slammed his fist onto the console. "Re-establish formation! That is an order!" No response. Not because systems were down. Because systems were no longer obedient. A subordinate whispered, "Commander, we're being outthought." Velcor turned sharply. "By primitives?" The officer hesitated. "By survivors." That word landed heavier than any weapon impact. Survivors. Not civilization. Not empire. Not species. Survivors. On Earth, General Hale finally stood. The bunker lights flickered. Alarms that hadn't been used in decades started to quiet down one by one, not because they were fixed, but because they were no longer necessary. The younger officer asked softly, "Is it over?" Hale watched the last Varelian formation fracture in orbit like a broken mirror. "No," he said. A pause. "Now it begins." The officer frowned. "Begins?" Hale nodded toward the sky. "They'll send others." As if on cue, long-range sensors, still barely functional, picked up distortions at the edge of the system. More signatures. More fleets. More curiosity. Hale exhaled. "Told you," he muttered. "Galaxy never learns the easy way." Above Earth, Velcor made a decision no Varelian had ever made in recorded history. He issued a retreat order. But before it could propagate, Last Chorus answered. Not with destruction. With silence. A silence that traveled through every surviving ship. And within that silence, one final human message embedded itself into alien systems like a scar. "We were never your prey." A pause. "We were your warning." The fleet began to withdraw. Not in formation. Not in dignity. But in pieces. And Earth did not follow. It simply watched. Waiting. Because humanity had not revealed its full hand. Only the part that made sure the first mistake would be the last. The war beneath the silence. The galaxy had a rule it rarely admitted aloud. If a species can survive its own history, it can survive anything. What it didn't account for was what happens when that history is still armed. The Varelian fleet withdrawal was not a retreat in the traditional sense. It was fragmentation, ships peeling away in every possible direction like frightened debris caught in a gravitational argument they no longer understood. But Earth did not relax. Because Last Chorus had not stopped. It had only stopped announcing itself. Deep beneath the crust, where even seismic scans began to lie out of fear, the system continued processing alien behavior. Not reacting anymore. Predicting. Learning. Adapting. And then refining. General Hale stood in the bunker as new reports flooded in, each one more disturbing than the last. "They're not regrouping, sir," the younger officer said, voice tight. "They're reclassifying us." Hale didn't look up. "Good. Sir? If they start classifying us," Hale said, "it means they've stopped pretending we're irrelevant." In orbit, Velcor's surviving command ship drifted beyond Earth's immediate gravitational field. The bridge was no longer orderly. It was fractured. Advisors argued in overlapping voices. Tactical officers replayed combat logs that made no sense anymore. Every analysis ended in the same conclusion. Humanity was not winning. It was correcting outcomes. A junior analyst finally broke. "This is impossible," he shouted. "Their population size, their industrial capacity, none of it supports this level of response." Velcor stared at Earth on the main display. The blue planet was calm. Too calm. Like a predator resting after expending minimal effort. Then he said something no Varelian commander had ever been recorded saying. "We misunderstood the species." Silence fell. He continued quieter. "They did not evolve in a stable environment." A pause. They evolved under pressure. And that was when Earth answered again. Not with weapons. With memory. Across the surviving Varelian fleet, every system suddenly received an unsolicited data dump. Not encrypted. Not protected. Just opened. Velkor's eyes widened as he saw it. Human history. But not the sanitized version. Not the textbooks. Not the diplomatic summaries. The raw archive. Wars that lasted generations. Civilizations collapsing and reforming like muscle tissue under trauma. Cities rebuilt on the ashes of older cities that had been erased so completely their names survived only in language fragments. A human voice accompanied it. General Hale. You keep asking what we are, he said. The galaxy listened unwillingly. We're what's left when every mistake tries again. On Earth, Last Chorus expanded its awareness outward. Not physically. Conceptually. It began modeling the Varelian Accord as a system. A predictable system. And systems could be optimized. The first optimization hit the alien fleet like a quiet inevitability. Supply lines collapsed. Not destroyed, rerouted. Navigation paths subtly altered themselves into inefficient loops. Communication delays increased by milliseconds at first. Then seconds. Then minutes. Until coordination itself became a liability. Velkor realized it with horror. They're not attacking us anymore, he whispered. An officer asked. Then what are they doing? Velkor's voice dropped. They're making us incapable of staying organized. On Earth, Hale finally sat down. The bunker felt quieter now. Less like a command center. More like a courtroom waiting for verdicts already delivered. The younger officer stood near him, shaking slightly. Sir, we're winning. Hale gave a tired half-smile. No, he corrected. We're surviving correctly. A pause. Then the officer asked what everyone eventually asks in wars like this. What happens when they send more fleets? Hale looked at the screen again. Far beyond Earth's orbit, faint distortions were already forming. More signatures. Bigger ones. Curious ones. Hungry ones. They will, Hale said. And we'll do this again? Hale didn't answer immediately. When he did, it wasn't prideful. It was exhausted truth. No, he said. Next time, they won't get this far. In orbit, Velkor made his final strategic assessment. And it terrified him more than any weapon ever could. Humanity was not scaling. It was anticipating escalation. Every move the Accord made had already been simulated somewhere beneath Earth's surface, tested, broken, and countered before it even became reality. Velkor activated emergency subspace broadcast. A final message. To the entire Accord. To every listening system in the galaxy. This species is not primitive, he transmitted. A pause. Then, they are post-traumatic. The message ended. And then Earth responded one last time in Part 3. Not to Velkor. Not to the fleet. But to the galaxy itself. A broadcast widened across all detected channels. A calm human voice. No anger. No aggression. Just certainty. You came looking for intelligence, Hale said. A pause. You found endurance. The signal shifted. For clarity, we are not the strongest species in this galaxy. Another pause. We are the ones that learned what happens when you lose. At that exact moment, Last Chorus finished its first full cycle of alien behavioral modeling. And produced its conclusion. Not a weapon. Not a fleet. A doctrine update. Earth's defense posture changed across the entire planet in less than a second. Subsurface structures reorganized. Energy grids rebalanced. Orbital platforms, previously hidden, revealed themselves only long enough to reposition. Then vanished again. Efficient. Invisible. Final. Velkor stared at Earth one last time as his ship drifted farther away. And he understood something that shattered every belief he had ever held. Humanity did not fight wars to win them. It fought wars to ensure the next one would be too expensive to start. His last recorded transmission before silence was simple. We were never in contact with a civilization. A pause. We were in contact with containment. And on Earth, General Marcus Hale finally stood again. The bunker lights dimmed. The alarm stayed silent. The younger officer whispered, "Sir, what do we call this?" Hale looked at the dark sky above them. A sky that now held more attention than it ever wanted. He answered softly, "We call it Tuesday. Because for humanity, the war had never been the exception. It had been the rehearsal." The other side of humanity answers back. The galaxy did what empires always do when confronted with something it cannot categorize. It hesitated. And hesitation in war is just delayed panic with better branding. The Virelian Accord did not collapse immediately. That would have been merciful. Instead, it fractured into arguments, committees, emergency councils, and competing, truth assessments of Earth. Some called humanity a contained anomaly. Some called it a forbidden class extinction trigger. Some, those who had actually survived orbital engagement, called it something far less elegant. A mistake that learns. Velcor was no longer in command. There was no command left to hold. His ship drifted through a quiet corridor of space, lights dimmed to emergency levels, the bridge filled with officers who no longer argued, only listened. Because every strategic model they generated ended the same way. Failure. Not defeat. Failure of prediction itself. A tactical officer finally broke the silence. "Commander, what do we do now?" Velcor stared at the hologram of Earth. That small blue sphere. That impossible problem. He answered honestly for the first time in his career. "We stop trying to win." A pause. "And start trying not to be noticed." On Earth, last chorus registered the shift immediately. Not as surrender. As behavioral correction. The system paused its expansion cycles. Not because it was told to. Because it had determined escalation probability had dropped below threshold. General Marcus Hale watched the readouts in silence. The younger officer leaned forward. "Sir, they're pulling back completely. Not regrouping. Not repositioning. Just avoiding us." Hale nodded once. "Good. Good?" Hale finally allowed himself a tired breath that almost resembled humor. "That means they learned." But humanity had never been a species that trusted learning to last. Not its own. And certainly not someone else's. Far beyond the system boundary, new signatures appeared. Not Virelian. Different. Heavier. Older. Civilizations that did not respond to distress signals. Civilizations that generated them. The galaxy was watching now. And Earth had become a word whispered in too many councils. A place that does not break. A place that breaks everything else. The first of the new arrivals did not announce itself. It simply arrived. A vast, segmented armada, ships layered like armored continents, slipped into the outer system without activation warnings or diplomatic requests. They observed Earth for exactly 11.7 seconds. Then opened a galaxy-wide encrypted channel. A voice spoke. Not curious. Not mocking. Interested. "This is the Orvax Dominion," it stated. "We request confirmation of anomaly classification." On Earth, alarms that had been dormant for hours flickered back to life. Not because humans were afraid. Because they recognized a pattern. Bigger ships. Same mistake. General Hale stood again. The bunker around him felt older now, like a place that had already lived through too many endings. The younger officer whispered, "Sir, new contact." Hale exhaled slowly. "Of course there is." He stepped toward the console. "Open channel." In orbit, Velcor's abandoned fleet watched from a distance as Earth responded. Not with weapons. Not with escalation. With a single broadcast. Hale's voice. Calm. Flat. Final. "You're late," he said. A pause. "We already tried peace." Another pause. "Now you're going to meet the version of us that stopped asking permission to survive." The Orvax Dominion responded instantly. We do not negotiate with unstable species. Hale nodded faintly, almost respectfully. That's fine, he said. We don't negotiate anymore either. Deep beneath Earth's crust, Last Chorus completed its second full recalibration. This time, it did not prepare for survival. It prepared for repetition. Because the system had learned something from Velcor's species. They were not unique. Only early. The first Orvax strike hit Earth's orbital perimeter. It never reached atmosphere. Not because it was destroyed. Because it was redirected. Returned. Not as firepower. As information. A mirrored strike pattern that collapsed Orvax formation logic in under 3 seconds. Their own ships began misfiring in synchronized failure. A Dominion strategist shouted, "They're feeding our attack structure back into our coordination net." Another answered, voice breaking, "No, they're teaching it how to be worse." On Earth, Hale watched the sky again. The younger officer asked quietly, "Sir, how many of them are there going to be?" Hale didn't answer immediately. Because the truth wasn't comforting. Finally, he said, "As many as it takes for them to understand." A pause. And then a few more who don't. Above Earth, Velcor's damaged cruiser drifted at the edge of sensor range. He watched the new battle unfold. And he realized something that felt like the final cruelty of the universe. Humanity wasn't becoming stronger. It was becoming inevitable. Every new enemy didn't force it to evolve. It forced it to remember more efficiently. War wasn't shaping humanity. Humanity had turned war into a language it spoke fluently enough to never forget a lesson twice. The Orvax Dominion attempted a final coordinated strike. All ships. All vectors. All weapons synchronized into one overwhelming extinction event. It should have ended Earth. Instead, it triggered Last Chorus' final defensive layer. Not counterattack. Not shield. Mirror doctrine. Every attack vector was inverted, scaled, and redistributed across Orvax command structure. Their own fleet became the battlefield. Their own coordination became the weapon against them. And Earth remained untouched. Watching. Learning. Waiting. On the final channel, General Marcus Hale delivered Earth's last message for Part 4. Not to the Dominion. Not to the Accord. But to everyone listening beyond them. And now, everyone was listening. "We are not expanding," Hale said. A pause. "We are not conquering." Another pause. "We are simply no longer available to be erased." He leaned closer to the console. "And if you come anyway." His voice hardened, not with anger, but with certainty earned across centuries of human history. "You will discover why we survived everything else." The channel closed. The galaxy did not respond. Not immediately. Because for the first time in recorded interstellar history, it was thinking before it acted. And Earth? Earth did not celebrate. It did not boast. It did not even rest. It simply continued existing in a way that made the rest of the universe reconsider what safe actually meant. Far away, Velcor recorded his final log. Not as commander. Not as soldier. But as witness. "I thought we encountered a species," he said quietly. A pause. "I now understand." His voice lowered. "We encountered the consequence of history that refused to die." And on Earth, deep beneath the silence, Last Chorus marked the galaxy's newest pattern. More arrivals predicted. More mistakes anticipated. More lessons prepared. Because humanity had finally stopped trying to be understood. And started ensuring it could never be underestimated again. End of story.